It is just wildly inappropriate. And yet, I'm really glad you're here.
Your actions were totally inappropriate.
For some reason, he felt that it was inappropriate.
Look into the camera and say something inappropriate.
You don't get personal. That is totally inappropriate behavior.
How inappropriate!
What exactly about my methods are inappropriate?
He tweeted some inappropriate things.
That's a little inappropriate, don't you think?
At what point is it inappropriate?
No, inappropriate. Inappropriate. Stop it right now. Oh, that is unbelievably inappropriate.
You're vulgar. You're inappropriate.
That's just grossly inappropriate.
Wow, you are so inappropriate.
It's such an inappropriate description.
Inappropriate, but precise.
Oh, you know what's inappropriate?
It's completely inappropriate. Why?
That's inappropriate! That's inexcusable!
Inappropriate things.
Be totally inappropriate.
Inappropriately so.
How very inappropriate, thank you.
Inappropriate.
It's wildly inappropriate.
This is incredibly inappropriate.
This is highly inappropriate.
Okay, this is inappropriate. Grossly inappropriate.
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 Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords, and this is Inappropriate Characters. I hope you guys can hear me out there. I am joined, as usual, by my co-hosts Ryan and Venger, who should be popping up now. Oh, there we are.
Stop!
And today was basically going to be like our Valentine's Day episode because it's the closest we get to Valentine's. But I've now learned from the chat, forgive me for not knowing this before not being in the US, but apparently it's also Super Bowl Sunday. So
what's that? Like some sort of cereal thing?
Yeah, the Bulls are super. The cereal is just mediocre, though.
I suppose it might mean that we'll have a bit less viewers than typical, but we just, our videos are scheduled, or our dates are scheduled in advance, so nothing to be done about it. But well, we were going to talk a lot about a little bit about at least the use of romance and sexuality in RPGs, a topic we've covered before and had some differing views on before in previous seasons. But we might as well also talk about, well, not the Super Bowl maybe, but as we were running through the intro, it brought up a question in my head about whether you guys, my co-hosts, and whether anybody in the chat has incorporated like a sports theme or scene or something like that ever in one of their RPG campaigns, we know that there's some sports based kind of board games, and they like Blood Bowl and what have you. But what I mean is in, a D&D campaign or some other RPG, you actually have a sports event be one of the key elements of the adventure or whatever. So what do you guys say? Have you ever done that?
Yeah. When I was writing Alpha Blue, I was, trying to get as much of that kind of like vintage, retro future sci-fi and space opera content into my brain to pull from. And I remember watching, God, it was either Battlestar Galactica or Buck Rogers or one of those, or maybe both. And they had an episode where there was some like sci-fi sporting event going on. And so I felt somewhat obligated to put something kind of like that into Alpha Blue and then in the RPG. And then I think some adventure, because I probably ran like somewhere between 30 and 50 Alpha Blue adventures in my, in my career. And so, yeah, I had some like Blue Ball or something like that.
Careful,
some like sci-fi version of basketball, something like that. And yeah, that was like a part of an adventure. Like the adventure happened kind of around that activity or that sport. Maybe people were betting on it, or and the gambling was related to some sort of like mafia-esque faction on the space station of Lust. So yeah, something like that. But other than that, I don't think so. Just because I just don't really care about sports whatsoever in real life.
I ran the equivalent of and totally lifted it right from the original James Caan movie Rollerball when I was doing Spelljammer.
Cool.
So there was an asteroid that was Rollerball Central, right? And the guy that ran the syndicate that was in charge of the league was evil space gangsta. So that's about the closest I got because nerds like
exactly. That's funny because you and I made in our RPGs, especially sci-fi RPGs, made sports interesting by including gambling and organized crime and if I had to do it all over again, prostitution. That's what makes sports interesting. The actual yeah, that too. Actually, thank you. Definitely, yeah. When I've been forced to go to a sporting event, that's usually where my eye is, on the cheerleaders, not on the ball or the person throwing or dribbling or whatever. But yeah, it's funny.
What about you, Pun? Did you ever insert anything sporty?
No. I see that Vision Storm said sports events and RPGs. Do you mean like gladiatorial combat? That works. Well, I mean, obviously, in my historical games, I've had historical sports, so to say, but that aren't really like our modern sports, right? So when I did a campaign in ancient Rome, of course, gladiatorial games were part of that, and chariot races, and in Dark Albion, jousting was a thing, of course, right? So is tennis, but I never really had a big tennis game in it or something like that. And in Sword and Caravan, in one of the adventures of my Sword and Caravan campaign, the player characters were stuck in a kind of a small town around the Hulwa Pass, and they ended up participating in a Turkish wrestling tournament that was happening at that same time, and so that was quite interesting. But as far as like actual sports are concerned, I think, as far as I remember, the only time that came up was in my Legion of Superheroes campaign, where very much like in one of the Legion of Superhero comics, there's Bat Ball, which is the 30th century version of baseball, and they were the Legion was called to do a celebrity game or something like that, and so we played through that game there. Now, I do have an intention that at some point or another in the world of the Last Sun, there's going to be something similar to that, some kind of bat ball game. And for whatever reason, I'm going to maneuver the PCs to having to be like part of the big game or something. I'm thinking maybe like, some dying orphan or something has a wish for Bill the Elf that he hit 2 home runs or something. He'll have to go in there and play the game. But I haven't done that yet, but it'll probably happen.
It's funny you mentioned jousting, right? Because
Yeah.
that's been in a lot of the fantasy games that I've run, but we just don't associate it with sports. But it really was big sporting event. It was the super joust of its time.
You had knights. I mean, they kind of do this in Game of Thrones, if you remember, with the one guy, the Knight of the Roses or whatever it's called. There were knights in the Middle Ages who had enormous fame only for jousts and tourneys, right? They'd actually never fought a battle in their life, but they were really good at jousting. And, of course, there were other knights who didn't joust at all because they were just too busy going around killing Scotsmen or something, So, and actually, now come to mention it, in my session yesterday of Sword and Caravan, because the player characters are in the Seljuk lands now, they ended up seeing these Turkmen tribesmen playing the ancestor of polo, which is basically just like polo, but you're using a sheep's head as the ball instead of and it's more violent, but they didn't actually play the polo; they just saw it. But there's a little bit of that, but I got to admit I haven't done a lot of stuff related to sports. Oh, in Last Sun, there's also the Death Race 1000. Speaking of stuff influenced by shitty 70s movies and stuff like that. So the player characters were in like the Death Race, which was actually more like, it was a bit less like the movie Death Race 1000 and more like Hanna-Barbera's Wacky Races, but it was really funny.
Everybody loves Snidely Whiplash, so, or the TTRPG equivalent of Snidely Whiplash. So wanted to give a shout out. We got lots of good folks in the chat tonight. Looks like Josh Butler, Judd Goswick, Vision Storm, the Ultra American TTRPGer, Heath, Kevin Fallick. Lots of goodies. And I know I missed some of you, but welcome, and we love and appreciate each one of you.
A comment from L here that says, let's talk about Hasbro's thank you for 50 years of D&D video, where they neglect to mention either Gary Gygax or Dave Arneson. This has been a trend in Wizards of the Coast that for like the last several years, both of those guys are damnatio memoria, right? They have erased them from history. They don't talk about them, and they've failed to credit them over and over again.
I was actually kind of surprised, and I forget who it was. I think it was Brink, and he did an interview maybe 6-8 weeks ago, and he actually mentioned both Gygax and Arneson, and it was visibly painful for him to say the words. And I was like, oh, this is just amazing. It really is. The culture that they are trying to cultivate, I don't understand it. I really don't. And I've given up on understanding it.
When you see an executive suddenly like wince when he's caught having to say something, it's often because in corporate culture they'll have trained him, right, to not, this is what you can't talk about, right? Don't say this, don't say that. And so that visceral reaction that you saw in his face was probably him realizing that he got himself stuck into a position where he had to mention Gygax and Arneson. He's worried about getting into trouble with Cynthia Williams.
Hey, Cynthia.
Oh.
Well, let's go on book and start our talk about the Hallmark holiday that's coming up, Valentine's Day. So what better to talk about than romance and sex in your role-playing game, and not the way that the Sparkle Trolls do it, I hope. Because, guys, I'm not describing your parts. So I do fade to black in my games. Pundit,
I demand that you describe my parts in full graphic detail.
Mr. Blue Vein is not allowed at the table, Venger. Sorry.
Too bad.
Pundit, you want to kick us off on this one?
Sure. I mean, for starters, the Ultra American just says, does anyone remember the Book of Erotica that was released by WotC for 3rd edition or 3.5? Yeah. The book of, I think it was called the Book of Erotic Fantasy, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Yeah.
And, so this sort of thing is something that has been just, there in D&D right from the very beginning, there was always a touch of kind of eroticism in like the early artworks and things like that, right? And in that, you know, you have a lot of pictures of sultry females, you know, sexy dryads and witches and whatever else, you know, that are showing a little bit of skin and all that, which is basically, I think, meant, first of all, it was part of the kind of heavy metal 70s fantasy appeal, and second, it was something that was likely to attract the teenage boys, which TSR figured was their audience, you know.
Sure.
So that was always there, but I think since then, there have been frequent attempts to kind of eroticize RPGs, and often these come from kind of two different directions. One of which is stuff like the Book of Erotic Fantasy that is about like trying to suggest that you could have campaigns that are more sexualized, and obviously, I mean, Alpha Blue falls into this area too, right? Though it's actually a lot milder than most people try to claim.
Don't tell them that.
Then the other side of it, that is in some ways been more successful in that they've gotten themselves into positions of influence, is the kind of queering of D&D, which is to say to oblige D&D to have a lot of representation of certain alternative lifestyles and sexualities that you know, include everything from having NPCs in adventures, you know, like we've seen in the recent like Ravenloft and Strixhaven and oh, what the hell is the other one? The Spire, you know, the
Radiant Citadel.
Radiant Citadel, yeah, there we go. In all of those, you have characters who are, you know, in relationships, same-sex relationships, and things like that. And that isn't erotica, but it is, you know, romance and sex. I guess it would fall into there. But there's, you know, so there's both sides of this. And ironically, of course, the new totalitarians are still basically very anti-sex. They're very much about talking about gender and sexual identity, but they're very prudish in many ways, right? And this goes all the way back to the third wave feminism of the 2010s, the Me Too movement, the movement to get rid of booth babes, and of course anything heterosexual is especially something they want to get rid of. But they also don't want to be particularly explicit about the actual sexuality of any of their activities in representation. They just want to have the representation, and that's like, it brings to mind that you know, apparently millennials had way less sex in their 20s than us Gen Xers did. In my case, probably way less than
but stud pundit.
No, I was a man whore in my 20s. But then the Gen Zers, they're having even less. So like they're probably having almost no sex at all. You know, like and that leads us to the troubling possibility of underpopulation becoming a big problem, even though certain people still want to claim that overpopulation is the problem.
But they want to talk about it, and they want it in the game.
But that's what I was getting to also, that they did this test, this survey of high school kids, right? And they found out that something like 40% of high school kids identify as some kind of part of the LGBTQ plus whatever spectrum, right? However, furthering that test, they discovered that the actual level of sexual activity and the type of sex that they're having hasn't changed, right? So that what you have is an enormous jump of something from like under 5% to 40% of teenagers claiming to have some kind of queer identity, but they're not actually doing anything. They're just claiming the identity, right? And that seems to me to be like what the romantic and erotic representation of queerness in RPGs does too, right? Anyways, that's my slightly politicized spiel. But beyond that, you know, I think I've said this in various videos before. I don't have any interest in seeing my fellow players mimic any kind of erotic experiences, right? So like, you know, the in my campaigns, in my historically authentic campaigns, characters will often be in situations where there might be dancing girls, or they might be going to a brothel or something like that, right? But we just have it say, well, you know, yeah, I'm going to drink and I'm going to whore with the women and whatever, and then it kind of fades to black, and the next morning they're out and about again. I don't want any of the gruesome details, especially not if it involves like some overweight gamer having to like act seductive or something in front of me, right? Like, sorry, that's where I draw the line, you know. But I know that other people have other perspectives on that. And then there's the other question of romantic plots or what have you, which are, I think, much more fair game. And it just kind of depends on the campaign, of whether it's the type of campaign where you have a lot of interactions with NPCs. If you are, right, like, I mean, in a lot of my campaigns, either the concept of family or of romance could be very significant, because sometimes some of my campaigns are, you know, run for like decades of game time, and so you want to have legacy and that sort of thing. So romantic subplots can be appropriate sometimes. Obviously, if you're just doing a bunch of dungeon dwelling, then not so much, you know. Anyway, what do you guys think about all this?
Venture?
Pick your topic.
How much spice do you like on your taco?
Sometimes I don't want the taco. I just want the spice. The spice must flow.
I'm going to call out Venger. I have a very strong suspicion that Venger writes his books much more dirty than he runs the games of those books.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I think
I'm just finishing up the little details on the blog posts for yesterday's session. And at one point there was a giant interdimensional spider like crouched at the precipice of this open portal in this cave where these like glowing green Calaxian crystals that can warp reality were. And when I was talking about, before the portal and the spider, I was talking about these sticky, translucent, like spider silk strands all over the crystals in this cave. And then one of the players stimulated a Chult's X card for humor, and I mean, it could have been sleaze too. And he suggested that the spider silk was rather another fluid, spider jizz, basically. And so we laughed. I'm like, okay, fine. And so then I went into more detail about the spider in the portal, and I was just like, if we're doing it, let's just go all out. And the spider's just like hunched over there in this portal, watching them, just using his little hairy spider leg, just beating off, as interdimensional giant spiders do. and then he wanted, and then the same player wanted to use one of the Calaxian crystals that he managed to like pry from the cave wall, and he wanted to like push whatever like army of spiders that they assumed were coming like back and close the portal, and he wanted to use a one of the dice for the lavender demon moons, so you can do like epic special deeds. There's only 7 moons, and so you can only use this like epic deed die 7 times throughout the life of the character. So he wanted to use one of his up, and he also wanted to use one of the gilded dice of Satanis, which cause awkward and embarrassing or cringe moments if you fail or succeed. And he succeeded in both. With the gilded die, it was a critical success. So he pushed all the army of spiders that was coming back, and he closed the portal, but it pushed the spider that was jacking off onto his crotch, And since the spider was already like doing the motions, the spider was like jacking the sorcerer off too. And
Jesus.
then, because of the Calaxian crystal, hey, you asked. It created like a physical, like a hard light sort of hologram of a beautiful woman that the sorcerer could then have sex with, instead of just merely being jacked off by this giant spider, because critical success demanded it, I felt. Yeah, which then just gave him the sleaze factor 5 bonus after he finished. But normally, Pundit, you're not too far off. The games I run, especially if it's at a con or if it's a one shot with strangers or online, it's usually not that dirty. But this session in particular was pretty off the rails and sexually charged, and I just kind of went for it because I'm comfortable with my group, I'm comfortable with my game, I'm comfortable with using sexuality in the game when it's appropriate. So in that case, I just throw all caution to the wind, and I just I go for it, which I think sometimes, if you feel comfortable in that setting with the players, you just got to do.
Man, I'm such a prude compared to Venture. I like to use it to titillate, right?
Sure, yeah.
It's there for the sizzle, but it's not the steak in the game, right? I mean, even in Greenhaven, I've got the dirty nuns in the Lakeside Chapel that are rumored to run a brothel, but you take it with the flow of the game, not the flow of the spider.
Yes.
But like I said before, I'm a big fan of
spider flow,
getting the intrigue in, and then when it gets to the point where it's going to go past the point of no return, I have no interest in sitting around at the table with friends of mine from 20 years and living out a sexual fantasy, right? So the chat was very much on board with Fade to Black, so I didn't feel so prudish. Man, I hate to think I'm the straight-laced one on this topic when it comes to how we're running the games. But yeah, it's there because we know who our audience is, right? And we want a little bit of that flavor, but I don't want a mouthful, so to speak. So,
too bad. You're getting a mouthful.
Shout out to Sad Wings Raging, $30 super chat. Here's to first edition AD&D Living Forever, Thaco, or go home, lads.
All right, I'm going home because fuck Thaco. Oh wait, I already am home.
Very much though.
Also, Thaco isn't in first edition AD&D.
That's true. That was the second edition.
Second edition innovation.
If I was running AD&D, I would totally use that 2-page spread matrix of like what armor class, versus what roll and the hit dice.
That's the perfect way to run it, Venger. 100%.
Because this brain was not made for advanced mathematics. I don't know if you've met this brain or the human attached to it, but no bueno when it comes to the mathematics. Mathematica in the Biblioteca.
Who I consider to be probably one of the top 5 knowledge bases for AD&D, and that's Bill Sylvie, the Dungeon Delver. And he is all in on the Matrix. And I went back and looked at it when I was getting ready to run an AD&D game, and that Matrix is beautiful simplicity. You've got your class, you've got your attack, you've got your roll. That's it. And it's truly, rules light before rules light was a phrase. So I am all.
Some people are scared of tables,
Well, I also like the chart from Phase Rip Marvel, so you got to crucify me on that one. Chris Miller, $10 super chat, reference to our buddy Garraby. Got to put a little hot sauce on your Thaco. So,
if I could say one thing for random tables, everybody knows how much I love random tables, I think, and how much I use them and include them in my games and adventures and design stuff. When, as a game master, you kind of have like the entire universe open to you, it's nice every once in a while to have something concrete that's like in front of you that you can physically roll and get a number and then look and consult and like, oh, okay. And then the spider jacks you off. And there's just so much like going on or potentiality, or there's literally the infinite. And it's nice to have like that random table is like a towel. In Guardians of the Galaxy. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's like having a nice, warm, dry towel with you when you're literally cruising the cosmos with just like your fucking mind, your imagination. That's it. It's nice to have a little something there that like grounds you a tad, or that something that you can reach for that's like real when everything around you in the game is, just fucking made up.
Yeah, most people don't have a problem with random tables. I'm saying most people do have a problem with cross-reference tables. Well, not most, but there's people that it became less popular than Thaco almost right away when second edition came out.
I mean, isn't that semantics? Random versus like a non-random.
No, because
it's a random table is a table.
A random table is the list. You roll and you look at the list. But what I'm talking about is a cross-reference thing where you have to like look and like that seems to me to be pretty simple. But a lot of people, right? That's already too much math, or something like that,
So the design guy in me loves the cross-reference table that you're talking about, Pundit. Specifically, and I mentioned it before, the Phase Rip Marvel table. I actually converted it into a dial system, so you don't even have to cross-reference it. You just dial in where your power range was, and then because it's set up in a table format, you can cut little windows on. I've got to dig this dial up. It's the best thing ever. I've had it for like 20 years. I did it in like Photoshop 1.0. It took me like 3 days. But no, I love those tables because it really does take the bricks out of the briefcase. If you've played Battleship, you can read this table. So I don't understand the hostility towards them.
Yeah, numbers just scare some people. But speaking of Marvel superheroes and bringing it back to the topic of like romance and RPGs, there's obviously some genres where a certain amount of romance is actually emulative of the setting, right? And superhero RPGs are one of those, right? Because not every superhero has a love interest, but an awful lot of them do, right? And then sometimes that ties into, do they know their secret identity or not, and all this. So sometimes superheroes fall in love with each other and things like that, Green Arrow and Black Canary or stuff like that, Lightning Lad and Satin Girl. And it's in those cases, there are some, like that's one genre. I'm sure there are others, but that's one that a lot of people play is superhero RPGs. There, it actually makes a lot of sense for a DM to allow the time for and the possibility for romantic subplots to emerge, and that makes it feel more like the comic books than if they didn't have that at all.
No, it's interesting too, the interplay, just talking about romance in general, that you can insert into a campaign with your NPCs and with the climate of a town, or if you flip it, you've got the Skeletor Evil Lyn thing going on, you can have that romantic power struggle between your bads as well. Also. So that's always an interesting dynamic that you can just push in there without pushing in, spider stuff. So.
Yeah, definitely not spider stuff. I was going to say, also that campaigns that go on for a long period of time, either in the real world sense or in the sense of the, in the game world, inevitably you end up doing more than just going around fighting stuff, right? I mean, I think most long-term campaigns, even if they start as a D&D dungeon crawl or something, to become long-term campaigns, it means the player characters have to have goals beyond just let's go to the next dungeon, right? So they're going to be making strongholds. They're going to be interacting with the people in high position of power, NPCs and stuff like that. And it can make a lot of sense in some of these campaigns to have romance or relationships or marriage or children or all that sort of thing happening, especially if in the game world decades are going by,
Right.
So in my Lion and Dragon campaign, that was, or some of them anyways, that was the longer ones, that was pretty typical, because in some cases there was the possibility, because we're running through the timeline at a kind of accelerated pace, that you would want to have your next player character be the son of your current player character or daughter or whatever, right? And
sure.
To benefit from what the previous character had set up. So there it makes sense. And of course in medieval, there's medieval romance, but then medieval like marriage is not necessarily romantic as such. A lot of time, most of the times they were arranged, at least if you were of a certain social class. But that's also interesting because it introduces a number of kind of political aspects of the game, and then there's the question of, do you actually like your wife or not? Which can sometimes be because you've barely met her when you get married. And
that's what I like best about it.
Had mentioned that somebody in the chat had said they thought Bill the Elf was married. He's not. He's actually, that campaign, right, which has been running for almost 11 years now. The player characters have been developing as they go along. Of course, a lot of them died, but then there's others, and they keep coming. There keeps being more of them, and they're going up in level. So they start developing personalities and whatnot. And Bill the Elf's actually he's like the Sheldon Cooper of the campaign. He has no sexual interest in anyone, right? But he's kind of autistic that way, right? He just likes to go around destroying things. But the other player characters, some of them have had significant romantic relationships in the campaign, usually relatively humorous ones, right? The cleric character, Sammy, she was her character, this would have fit into one Avengers games, I'm guessing. She started out as a prostitute, as like that was her 0 level class, and then she became a cleric. It came out over the course of the campaign that she tends to have an attraction to hairy, intelligent humanoids, and so she was trying to hit on Space Bear for quite a long time there, but it was an unrequited romance. Space Bear wasn't into her. And then eventually she ended up marrying one of the greatest lawyers in the world of the Last Sun, who is a blob creature, right? The law blob. They're married, and he has kids, so she's a stepmom to a pair of younger blobs. And then the cat boy has simped for any female NPC he ever saw, right? And he didn't get anywhere with almost any of them, right? Except that he had an on and off relationship with the avatar of the sun, which is a female avatar, right? Her name is Anima. But she was mostly using him. And then he ended up in Minatoria. This female minotaur named Bovinia was attracted to him, and she kind of basically forced him into a relationship, but he eventually kind of decided he liked it, and they got married, and then they had kids, right? And so when you think about it, Catboy is half cat and half humanoid, right? And Bovinia is a minotaur, so she's half cow and half humanoid. So the kids are fucking abominations, right? they're half human, 1/4 cat, and 1/4 bull or cow, right? And we decided to roll to see whether they would get like the most attractive possible combination or the worst possible combination of those traits. And of course, they got the worst possible combination. So they're these hideously ugly human cat cow things that the rest of the party laughs at him about. So there's a lot of that stuff.
Bovinia gives a new meaning, only it's not snoo snoo, it's moo moo.
Yeah, exactly. She's much bigger than he is too, obviously.
So how do we want to bookend this conversation on romance and sex in our games? And no more spider talk.
speaking of Spider Talk, I would like to cap this off as or with a potential group project for anybody that wants to participate. We could even host it over at the RPG site forum. Let's create together a D100 random table for the Spider Jack concept.
Lord.
How many different up down venture? There's 2, not 100.
Oh no. There's literally, if we rack our brains, there's probably literally like thousands of different ways of doing that. Up down up down to up. ABBA select
the Konami
start
code
to the right. So let's do that. I'm going to start a thread, and then whoever wants to participate, do that, and eventually I'll put it up on drive-through as a free product that you can download. I'll pay a layout guy $50 to like make it look nice, and
just to put it into perspective, 100 is more than these 2 pages, right? That's
100 is literally 100.
Yeah.
As the owner of the RPG site, it is a free speech site, so of course, Venture, you're allowed to do this. But I will remind you that one of the rules is no pornographic images on the website. All right.
All right. So no pictures.
Put any pictures.
No pictures. Okay. Keep the spider porn to yourself on your own hard drive. Nobody needs to see that or contact the FBI. That's right. The words, just text only.
Jeremy Griffin. But why, though? Why,
I'm
Venture?
asking the same thing, Jeremy. I'm asking the same thing.
Oh, I'm waiting to change the slide now. Oh, boy. Here we go. Well, who wants to give the dime store tour of this little bit of not breaking, but broken news from Wizards of the Coast as we move out of romance and sex and into the death or the perceived death? It's coming. We're seeing there's 1 foot in the grave of print materials from WotC. Now, I've been singing this song for a long time. Pundit, you did a video on it.
Yeah.
So give everybody sort of the background of why this prediction just got a whole lot stronger.
Well, it's pretty simple. You'll remember that in the last quarter of last year, Wizards had announced that they were ending their deal with Penguin to be the Penguin Publishing to be the distributor of the D&D books to bookstores.
Right.
And at the time, a lot of people said, well, that doesn't mean anything because there's just like 12 other distributors that Wizards is still using. And I'm like, yeah, but that's nothing, right? Like those guys are all incredibly small fry compared to Penguin, which is like the giant distributor, right? So it's like saying, well, my books aren't going to be delivered by Amazon delivery anymore, but they are still going to be delivered by Pablo on his motorcycle. It's not the same thing, So that was the first thing that I saw that made me think, okay, they're really seriously going to be dropping book publication. But I couldn't be absolutely sure of that, or at least not as sure as I am now, as when it came out a couple of weeks ago, that among the firings, and this was very low key because it wasn't really publicized or commented on in any way for quite a while until somebody figured it out, they've basically fired everybody that has to do with book publishing in Wizards of the Coast in this last round of firings. And what that means essentially is that they're very clearly planning to have almost no book products from here on in. Right? Like I'm guessing the 3 1D&D products are going to come out. They're going to still be published. Possibly you'll only be able to get them from the Wizards website. I don't know, or from Amazon maybe because they're probably still doing work with Amazon. But you're they might not even be found in like conventional bookstores.
I can give a little insight on that from my relationship with our FLGS. Full disclosure, I have a small ownership stake in it. There are still distribution channels for what is being presented as future releases. The kicker is it's now being sold as a bundle to us. So it is the print version and the PDF together. There's no option just to order books, at least not through the distributor that we use, which is secondary in line to Penguin Random House. So I really think they're going to put the squeeze on it.
Is that a distributor that specializes in PDFs? Or not PDFs, sorry, in game stores?
It is a distributor that specializes in tabletop role-playing and board games. You might say they are a large alliance, so to speak. So,
their main customers are like FLGS.
Yes.
Not Barnes and Noble.
Right, 100%.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. So they'll probably still be able to have. You'll still be able to get the books at a local game store. I don't know if like did the price mark go up so that
significantly. It's not
because that's the
finalized.
thing. With Penguin and that model, it's very, very low. A very low margin, a very big margin. But if you're doing a smaller distributor, the margin goes way up, so the books are going to be more expensive at the game store.
Yeah, if I had to put an MSRP on it right now, I'm looking at $69.99, Pundit. That's huge. So
it is. But I'm thinking, anyways, that beyond that, it seems pretty clear to me that they're just not going to be making a lot of D&D books. What they're going to be doing, I said in my video, is that you'll still get probably certain products that will come out in any given year. I don't know how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, that will be probably very high quality in terms of appearance. It'll be like, it'll be a box set or it'll be some deluxe book. And it's going to have a lot of emphasis on looking really pretty. And it's going to be selling, basically, it's not going to be handled by a books division of Wizards of the Coast. It's going to be handled by the merchandising division. It'll be seen basically as a kind of merchandising. And that quite possibly also means that the books will not necessarily all or any of them be all that emphasized for their playability. They might be more emphasized for their collectability.
Yeah, I wonder also if once the print runs are done for the first major print runs for the books, if that's going to be it and they're going to make it sort of like an exclusive and control the supply to artificially inflate the demand. There's also rumblings that there's going to be exclusive digital only content, and I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. That's 100% going to happen.
They're specifically, one of the things that came out, I think Tenkar got to this first, is that they're Wizards of the Coast is seeking to hire a new vice president of digital publishing. And specifically, one of the job requirements that they list is that he must have experience with digital subscription models as one of his qualifications or their qualifications. So this is very clear that what they're going to be doing is they are still going to be putting out product, but the product is going to be digital product, probably tied to the virtual tabletop, and that it's probably going to be part of a subscription model, which is what they hope to have for the digital tabletop.
No, I think that they are very much in line, as is everyone. They're looking at this as if they were a software company. And the model is that you are leasing that software. Your license is a lease. Even if you look at video games over the last 20 years, the licensing on a physical disc still says you don't own shit, right? You are licensing the use of this game. So
and I saw many people comment on my video that D&D books that they got in digital format, I don't know if it was in D&D Beyond or where it was, that they only realized later that those books had later been altered from their original version. Stuff had been removed because it was problematic, right? And they hadn't even been notified about that, right? So this is the problem with having digital product, is that if the company decides, they can just change it on you, whether you want that change or not, because you don't actually own it. That's part of the contract you sign when you click the terms and conditions button that nobody reads, you know?
Right, 100%. And those changes, you know, I think they've been documented well over the last 6 months. We started to see them about a year ago, but it's really, really, really crept in, and they've made some pretty significant and sweeping changes to silly things like language. You know, the word savage has somehow got on the hit list. That's now off the books. You know, we don't want evil. We want all of these different shades of gray. And unfortunately, they took what was perceived as a published product and said, nope, we're waving our hand and changing this text. So another super chat. Thank you very much, Chris Miller. If you're not familiar with Chris Miller, you really are, because Chris is one of Pundit's publishers and the publisher of Mad Scribe magazine. Chris Miller says, now with WotC no longer using hubs like Drive-Thru, Penguin, Ingram for printing and shipping, what will that mean for indie designers?
Well, in the first place,
go
sorry,
ahead,
you go ahead if you want to, but
no,
I was going to say that in the first place, we're still not sure that they are going to be giving up on Drive-Thru, because of course they have the DMs Guild on Drive-Thru, right? Like that's the 5e store basically, and I mean the DMs Guild might still exist even if Wizards drops it, because there's all tons of third-party product there which now will be protected because of the Creative Commons. But as far as I know, Wizards has not backed out of the DMs Guild yet, you know. So that certainly might happen. I mean, it would make sense to happen if they have no more books to provide, or maybe they'll just kind of stop producing more books for it, but they'll still have the classic catalog of WotC and TSR products on there. It's hard to say.
I don't know. They have their hooks really deep into Drive-Thru with DMs Guild and with their other products too. I also think that they probably have more than one direct channel to ears that will listen at Drive-Thru because of the revenue that they can pump through there. So I don't think that if I were to bet, I don't think that they're going to exit Drive-Thru. I think they're going to leverage Drive-Thru. And I don't think that an acquisition, if Wizards remains intact as we know it, and Hasbro doesn't sell it off, I don't think that a Drive-Thru acquisition is off the table by any means. Wizards wants to have some sort of infrastructure in place, and what's better than buying one that's already there, you know?
Well, maybe, except that if they're not really making new print books, then Drive-Thru becomes kind of irrelevant to them. I would think that if anything, if they were going to try to buy off Drive-Thru, it might be to try to kill it, because the one thing that has been the fatal flaw in the whole Cynthia Williams plan is that she couldn't get the OGL 1.1 out. She couldn't suddenly stop people from making third-party products, right? Which is what she wanted to do very clearly, because she wanted to say, well, okay, we're going to make it so that nobody else can make 5e books.
Right.
And then everybody will have to buy one D&D books from the virtual tabletop, and we'll have total control. But now they don't have that, you know. So they're still going to, you know, like there are probably going to be 5e clones that are going to come out now once 5e is done, and especially if the virtual tabletop is now dominating all of Wizards' interests. So, you know, there might be, but even then, their motivation to do that, I don't know how big it would be, because that still wouldn't be likely to make a big difference. The people who are going to go to the VTT are going to go to the VTT anyways, and the people who wouldn't go to the VTT aren't their customers, so they probably wouldn't bother with buying out Drive-Thru just to kill it. And if they're not making books, they're not going to be buying Drive-Thru to be able to make books, right?
Right. Or
so
what about the possibility of the one D&D stuff going exclusively? If you want to hold it in your hands, it would be POD. What if they take a step backwards and borrow from the indie developers?
Yeah, I think that's possible. And I think as far as Chris's question of what will it mean for us indie designers, well, all I can say is, as a historian, we can say that in the historical perspective, when 4th edition came out and was a disaster for Wizards, that was the largest period of boom growth for the OSR. It was what made the OSR so popular. And so usually if, I think it's bad maybe overall for the hobby and that the number of people getting into the hobby will diminish, but it'll actually be probably good for indie designers, especially ones that are doing either third-party 5th edition stuff or OSR stuff, because suddenly we'll be doing this and Wizards won't be. So we won't be competing with the latest Wizards book anymore. We'll be just competing with each other basically. But that'll mean that anybody who isn't interested in doing the new thing Wizards is going to do will be looking at those areas, at third-party 5e stuff and at the OSR. So especially for those two groups, it'll be probably quite beneficial.
Timothy Shanks says he has no interest in 5e DM's Guild, but there's no reason they would stop selling PDFs or PODs of the old stuff. You would think that, but we talked about it on my show, Nerd Cognito, last week, about how companies are making economic gain moves secondary to gaining this woke culture credit. And if the older material is truly so horrific and evil, like that end of the hobby wants us to believe, I don't put it past them to cut their nose off to spite their face here. I really have encouraged, especially the younger folks that have come to my tables and maybe only knew 5th edition and discovered older systems and said, hey, these are great. I've encouraged them as well as old heads like us. Look, hold your nose, buy the old stuff that you need now, because there's no guarantee that it's going to be there tomorrow. And I am still waiting for that shoe to drop. And I get it. I'm a pessimist. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I own that, but it's only a matter of time until they're too problematic to sell.
There's a definite possibility of that happening. There is. I won't deny that. Now, at the same time, there's also some signs. I mean, like, one of the things that's probably going to happen because of the drop of published book sales by Wizards is that all of the woke crew that have been writing for them for the last 2 years are just not going to get, like, most of them are probably on temporary contracts. Wizards does that a lot, right? They hire you specifically to do this one project, and then they might hire you again for the next project, or they might not. But if they're not making any books anymore, then all of those people will just never get another contract done for them by Wizards. Like, that'll just be it, because they'll have nothing to do there. And that'll be it, right? And I'm pretty sure that the type of adventures that they're going to use for a VTT, because of the nature of a VTT, is not going to be suitable to the type of bullshit that we've been seeing from Wizards books recently, right? Like, you're not going to have in the virtual tabletop, a whimsical journey through the, through a magical fairground, and you're not going to have a VTT adventure where you're running a Starbucks in a magical university. And you're not going to have one where you're having an eating contest while you're on an eat, pray, love vacation into a multiversal realm that is similar to Thailand or something like that. Like, none of those are going to fit the mold of the VTT, which is definitely going to be more focused on dungeon style adventures and maybe overland adventures with combat, right? Because that's what a VTT is good at doing.
Right.
So
I would think Eat, Pray, Love, the campaign setting. That's what I want to see for 2024.
Like the Chult version of Eat, Pray, Love, but do it really hard, right? Like, seriously, the player characters have to be bored middle-aged housewives that go to Chult on vacation and are trying to find romance and spirituality in the worst possible place in the universe to get it. That would be a genius book. If you can pull it off, Venture, you might win an Emmy. I don't know.
Maybe. I'd be open to co-writing it, since you have all that time to write new periodicals every week and a half. By the way, we should probably get to our promotion, because I got 3 minutes, and my daughter's already like, Dad, you need to tuck me in. So
that's important.
It is about
the time went fast.
Ryan, why don't you start with Venger, because I got to go refresh my iced coffee because everything's melting here.
Sounds like a plan. Venger, Since you expire first, have at it, my friend.
All right, thank you. Yes, I see the little graphic up there. AdventureCon 3, that is still happening in Madison, Wisconsin this July. Tabletop Experiences has the URL. That's where you can find the information, and you can buy a weekend badge. Please do so, because I want to get as many people playing and gaming and experiencing the old school stuff, the OSR, traditional RPGs as possible. I just, I want to have fun. I want to have fun with you and lots of other people that I either know or don't know. And because the people attending this are cool and they're hardcore and they're not woke, and they're in for, they want to have a good time role playing, and they want to do it the whole weekend and just kick back and just explore and experiment. That we're going to play Dallas, the role playing game, somehow, and if I'm running it, which I might, it's going to be in Chult, so you don't want to miss stuff like that. I am absolutely going to include the D100 random table for Spider Jack. That's crowdsourced group project I put just a few minutes ago. I put that up in the design, development, and gameplay category of Pundits, the RPG site.com. So yeah, participate, do that, because I'm gonna roll on the Spider Jack table at VentureCon. I'm kind of between projects, so I'm just focusing on VentureCon right now. If you want to get one of the last things that I wrote, there's the Gilded Die of Satanus. There's Under Fuchsia Sky. That's the Chuld webcomic. That's down from $10 to $5, so it's 50% off for the foreseeable future, because that's doing pretty well now that I lowered the price. And instead of start advertising that with customer emails on DriveThruRPG. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there. But visit the RPG site and put in your results for the Spider Jack table. I would love to hear your responses. I would love to have you participate. I would love to see you at VentureCon 3 in July in Madison, Wisconsin. So tell your friends, let people know, buy a badge, and I'll see you there.
Sounds good. Pundit, you're up next.
See you guys.
All right. See you later, Ranger. Okay, so I am currently, my latest publication here is my Pundit Files number 5, Silk Road City Guide to Baghdad, which is a complete guide to the city of Baghdad in the 12th century and late 12th century, the time of Sword and Caravan. And it has details on all of the, the history of the city, its neighborhoods, the details of, what each neighborhood has, and so on, adventure cues, and basically everything you need to run an adventure in medieval Baghdad. And obviously, if you're a Sword and Caravan fan, you're probably going to really like this product. But I mean, you can also port that into, I don't know, if you're running an Al-Qadim type campaign, or you just have you got some exotic area that's kind of Middle Eastern in style, you can pop it in there as a city. And that is, as usual, the Pundit Files are only available at the Red Room store. So be sure to check it out and check out my previous issues, and check out the other great stuff that they have for sale there at the Red Room store. And you're bound to find something. So I mean, there's only 5 issues so far, but they're already of a very varied lot. So you're likely to find something you like there. And every issue is only about $3.50, and it helps to keep Meatball in tuna. As far as Baptism of Fire, because inevitably I knew someone was going to ask about that, we're getting really, really close. It's just got to do a little bit of finishing stuff on the layout and the map. I've seen the kind of the current version of the map for it is just fantastic. I love it, and we're just finishing off some more details that have to be revised there, and then in a couple of weeks after that it'll be published, and we just have to get it through drive-through first and all that. But it is coming. It's coming very, very soon. It's just taking its time, but it's going to be worth the wait. So let's just keep building that anticipation for it. And I guess that's about it, but be sure to check out all my other products. You can still get also the entire Pundit Presents series on Drive-Thru-RPG, as well as the Old School Companions 1 and 2, and World of the Last Sun, and the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, which is an excellent source book for weird gaming stuff, generators of all kinds. And of course, be sure to keep checking out the products from Mad Scribe, like Sword and Caravan, Heroes and Villains of the Silk Road, and Wilderlands and Social Encounters. And I guess that's everything for now. The next issue, the next issue of the Pundit Files is going to be, let me just double check that. Siege Rules. Yeah, so in the next one that's coming out in about a week and a half, I guess. Well, it's coming out on the 20th. On the 20th, number 6 will be mechanics for running sieges in any kind of medieval fantasy type campaign. So check that out. That's it.
Very cool stuff. Very cool stuff. I, as anybody that's heard me in the last 4 weeks, have this Village of Greenhaven thing that is available on Drive-Thru-RPG. It's doing very well. I
hit silver. Well done.
Yeah, we hit silver. It is a complete village that you can pop in. It's built to be system agnostic, so no matter what you're running, whether you're running old school AD&D all the way through 5th edition, you can still pop this town in. It's got locations, it's got events, NPCs, shops, lots of random tables, and again, it's built to be brain fuel for the DM, so you can pop it into any setting. I've got people that are telling me all about their different homebrew worlds that they're putting it in. I know a lot of folks that are jumping it into their old Greyhawk stuff. In our chat tonight, Ultra American TTRPG told me he's going to be running a sci-fi campaign, and there's going to be some sort of asteroid hurtling through space where Greenhaven exists. Go to Drive-Thru-RPG. Just search Greenhaven, GREENHAVEN. It is $2.99. Again, I priced it so that everybody can get it. And, ta-da, the print version is going to be coming eminently soon. As soon as one last, filter from Drive-Thru gets passed. But I got the proof. It looks beautiful. All of those lovely random tables at the end there. Print version coming up, Drive-Thru-RPG, print on demand, $6.99. Again, I tried my best for this entry in particular to make it as affordable and accessible as possible. There will be a combo package if you want to pick it up, but you're not really you're saving like $1.50 or $1 or something like that on the combo. So if you really want to get it and pop it into your game right now, I absolutely encourage you to grab the PDF right now. $2.99 Drive-Thru-RPG. I've begun work on the next installment in the Pop-In Principles series. They are standalone sequels, which means that if you want to, they all can exist in the same world, but they are not exclusively required to do so. The next one is going to be more of an adventure as opposed to a town. And I've found some of the unique design challenges trying to do things like, how am I going to make a monster system agnostic? How am I going to make a trap system agnostic? But it is coming out. I haven't released the title yet, even though it's up here and on paper. but it will be coming out Q2. So after the Greenhaven POD hits, because I know a lot of people, we originally weren't going to do a POD. A lot of people saying, Ryan, I got to hold it in my hands. So that's what inspired the POD to happen. We're looking at the next tier on Drive-Thru-RPG, which is Electrum. So every PDF helps, and just spread the word. I cannot tell you how honored and humbled I am by all of the feedback that I've received on this. I really expected it to come out and get shredded, and people genuinely like it. So I am happy that I was able to put some sort of meaningful contribution out there. Village of Greenhaven, $2.99 PDF right now. POD, I'm thinking this week, but I don't know. I am at the mercy of the Drive-Thru-RPG gods on that one. Other than that, you know where to find me, Nerdcognito. We have a YouTube channel that we're starting to grow. It's a baby channel. But the big show, you can join the 1,000 strong every week that get it downloaded to their devices. Go to the podcast provider of your choice. Every major podcast provider has it, whether it's Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, you name it, we're there. I never used to like saying things like this, but I legitimately think we are one of the largest audio-only podcasts in our corner of the hobby, and we are proud to bring you an hour of just nerdy talk each and every week to your device. So buy Greenhaven and subscribe to all of the Nerdcognito stuff everywhere, whether it's on YouTube or at your favorite podcatcher. That's all I've got. So
Frank Estroso said to me, please do jousting, Pundit. I'm assuming that you mean for a future Pundit Presents. Yeah, I probably could do something like that. I mean, in my own house rules for jousting with Lion and Dragon are fairly straightforward, but it might be enough to fit a Pundit Files issue. So yeah, maybe I'll put it on the list of stuff to think about.
Josh Butler said, I have a real book to plug. I do. Chat, it is your turn to be the driver of the conversation. If there's something you want us to talk about, throw it into the chat. We'll see if we can get it there. Pundit, what is on the docket next?
Well, I guess we could comment on the fact that Dragonlance fans have just dodged a bullet, in that apparently there had been plans for some time to make a live-action Dragonlance TV series. No doubt, you know.
Joe Manganiello, Pundit, right? And as far as modern Hollywood guys go, I think he's been a reasonable ambassador for D&D. You know, he does toe the line.
Yes, but you know that whatever they did would look almost nothing like Dragonlance. I mean, look at the book that they came out with, right? Like,
right.
You know that, I don't know, the half of the characters are going to be race swapped, and you know, the romances are going to be gay romances, and you know, the Draconians will have done nothing wrong, you know, and actually it's prejudice that's the real villain all along, or something like that, and the gods are actually bad because, you know, your gods aren't supposed to be good,
right?
You know, so it's actually about the power of strong females defying the gods, and you know, like, you know, that it would have been a dumpster fire, right? Everything that they make now is a dumpster fire, so it would have been probably horrific. You know, like, ask Witcher fans, ask Wheel of Time fans, you know, ask all of these people that have had their beloved products, and that half of the people were cheering for those books, for those products or books or whatever to come out as TV shows, and then look horrified when they see what actually is produced, you know. So again, I say to Dragonlance fans, you should feel very happy about the fact that this hasn't been made now. You know, who knows? Maybe in the future, at some point later on, it'll be better, you know, maybe.
Straight from Margaret Weiss's mouth, though, it is done. It is dead and on the slab, so to speak. Manganiello made a statement about it as well. So at least for now, that property is safe. Now, I might take some crap for this. I've never was a huge Dragonlance fan of all of the settings. It was probably my least favorite, but I know that all of the folks that were really into the setting and the novels loved it and were really excited for this. You know, this might be a blessing in disguise because the pendulum may start to swing back and we might actually get a good product in 3 to 5 years. Maybe. I don't know. I'm hoping we're starting to see some resistance. We're starting to see, I guess, some woke fatigue kick in to that middle group of gamers, right? We always talk about the end, our OSR brethren, and gamers that have a similar philosophy. We, of course, have the giant sparkle troll, but there's this huge section of folks that have just had their heads in their books for 20 years. They're still playing the same thing with their table, and they don't see this. They're not on TTRPG Twitter. They're not swimming in the cesspools of Reddit. So they're just happily continuing on.
Normies, yeah.
Yeah, that fatigue is starting to kick in there, too, and they're starting to raise eyebrows, being like, really, guys? Really? The bear is going to get it on? Really, guys? So hopefully that fatigue pushes the pendulum in the direction back towards the middle.
Well,
I mean,
that I don't think that by itself is the most hopeful sign, because ultimately what you had was this was being driven not by popular demand ever, right? It was being driven by activists who had taken over the corporations. But what are hopeful signs are that, first of all, a report has come out saying that something like $3 trillion of money has been lost on account of DEI initiatives, right? So
that's an
that's how
amazing
much it
number.
costs the corporate world. And I think that the corporate world, we always said, oh, well, they're willing to lose money to do this stuff because they believe in the philosophy of it, but that only goes so far, right? Like, and I think $3 trillion might be as far as it goes, right? I'm not myself a big investment guy or anything like that, right? But I know people who are very big investment people, and they've been pointing out to me that there are a lot of these large corporations that are very quietly, very secretly divesting all of the DEI stuff, right? And it's going to take a little bit of time, but they're getting rid of it because they realize, because of two things. One is the losses, and the other is that there was a radical sea change after October 7th, right? After the Hamas attacks on Israel, when suddenly they saw a whole bunch of people that were in the corporate world saw this radicalism that the same people that were telling them, oh, you have to have queer, you have to queer characters from popular media because otherwise you're trying to commit genocide or something like that. Those same people are calling for genocide, right? And so at that point, this freaks out quite a lot of the people involved, right? I mean, obviously Jewish people for starters, but also, your typical guy who went to a private school and is kind of he's mainly a business globalist type of guy, but who doesn't, he always was conveniently this kind of lefty because that's, a type of internationalist lefty because that was what they were raised to be, right? And all of a sudden they've realized that, oh shit, for the last 30 years, you've been bankrolling these people who are probably going to want to kill you at some point. So that's the point where they suddenly say, okay, hang on here, just hang the fuck on a moment. We gotta dial this out, right? And I think that's part of what Wizards is doing, right? Like, one of the reasons that they're getting rid of the book printing the way they are is because that allows them to stop hiring these maniacs that they've had in the book sections of D&D for the last 2 years, in a way that gives them cover, right? Because if they just fired them, then they would be accused of, betraying wokeness and whatever else, right? But if, I'm sorry, we're shuttering this whole division, so there's no work for you, then that's it, right? You don't have to worry about it because that's the excuse.
Right. $5 super chat from the Mad Scribe, Chris Miller again, referring to Dragonlance, I believe. Unless one of us writes it, I don't trust new products anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I was going to say maybe if in a few years there's a Dragonlance live action series on the Daily Wire TV or something like that, that would probably be trustworthy, but I definitely wouldn't trust anything done in like Amazon Prime or HBO or something.
No, or even in-house. Wizards and Hasbro have now pushed out their Dungeons and Dragons video on demand channel. In the States, it's on Pluto TV now. And aside from the classic cartoon, that stuff is wretched, man, and not in a good way.
I was going to say, that would be a disaster for reasons besides the wokeness, right? It would just be so horrific. It would be just trash.
It's like a bunch of guys and gals drinking Ginny D Light and going on and producing the equivalent of this stream with a budget and a studio, only just spewing all of the garbage that has been tearing down our beloved Dungeons and Dragons. It's bad. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to watch it. I clicked through it a couple of times, and whew, it's ugly. It is ugly.
I don't get it here, but I can only imagine.
Yep. Checking out the chat. Surly says drinking Ginny and juice. I don't know, a couple drinks and maybe if she was at a hotel bar, but that's another story for another day.
Well, this is one of the issues with the Wizards of the Coast, which is that, and Hasbro in general actually, is that they keep trying to do anything other than what they were originally meant to be, right? They were a toys and game company. And they were pretty good at making toys and games, but they don't want to be doing that, right? They want to do video games, they want to make movies, they want to have a virtual tabletop, and they're terrible at all of those things, Like they need to learn, just farm it out, goddammit, to people who actually know what they're doing, right?
We got another super chat in here. Jeff from Dakar, $5 Canadian style. What's the one thing you know now you wish you knew when you published your first game content for the public? Pundit, you have a wealth more experience than I do for this. I know I did learn a lesson, and I'll show it off and talk about it when you're done, because I'm small potatoes here.
Well, that's a very good question. I'm trying to think if there's something in particular. I mean, obviously, as I've gone along making more and more products, I've become better at the tricks of it, right? At like, how to write, what type of content to put in, how to do, random generators, how to figure out rules and all that stuff. But as far as something that I was like a big revelation or something, I'm not sure. I think probably for me, the biggest thing that was a moment where something like switched on and I had an idea that ended up being really successful for me, was when I started doing Pundit Presents, which is that before that I was doing big books, right? And so I'd write one big book product every, 9 months or so or a year, and it would come out, it would sell well, and obviously most of the sales happen in the first couple of months, and then after that you get a trail of sales and stuff. And then I decided as an experiment to try doing a regular series of short products that were PDF only and that were at a fairly reasonable price. And that was the moment that basically from there I passed from being a guy who designed RPG products that was making some money from it to being a guy that was a full-time game designer, right? That was the thing that was the killer application that allowed me to make the kind of income that I can dedicate myself to this full time. So if I'd figured that out earlier, it would have been kind of cool, right? But actually, I couldn't have figured it out too much earlier, because part of what makes those kind of things successful, I think, is my own level of like name recognition and stuff like that. So that probably could have happened a lot earlier than it did. But I think that's the closest thing for me. I mean, remember that I don't publish games though, Jeff. I just write them, and I use, my publishers are the ones who make the product. So I haven't had to learn a bunch of lessons about how to publish. I did that very much on purpose, even though it means I'm splitting profits with other people. I still prefer it that way because it means all I have to do is write.
I learned that the process really never ends, right? Greenhaven, as it is standing right now, has gone through all of the play testing and all of the pre-writing and the writing, and we are now on version 1.5, right? I've made 5 post it going live revisions. Not because of silly things, I was cautious, I didn't have typos, I just found stuff that I could make better. And then, I had this real bug up my ass the first week. I said, look, guys, if we get this thing to drive through bestseller levels in the first week, Copper's the low one, said if we make that level, I'll double the random table. So I invited more work in, but it was good work. And as I move into the next project, I take with me the idea that nothing that I've committed to this point is done until I'm on the next project. So it's very cyclical, and you're always going to find things. You also have to find the sweet spot of balance of how much is too much, right? There's a lot that ended up on the cutting room floor that I was very saddened about at first, and now I realize that was a blessing in disguise. So it is a commitment, and Pundit is fortunate. It is his living. It's what he does. For those of us that are just starting, I still got the day job, man. It is a time investment and a dedication that a lot of folks just don't have. Everyone says, well, I could write an RPG book, but few do because of skill and time. And when you get into it, you have to really absorb everything that's around you and put those things that worked into your product. So I am the last one here that can give advice other than be prepared to keep finding mistakes, and you have to find that inner barometer where you're okay with the product as it is so that you can move on. Because if I kept refining and refining and refining, I would still be pre-publishing right now. And not that I think Greenhaven is bad by any stretch of the imagination, but you have to know when it's done. And that's a hard thing for a lot of folks to do. I know guys that have aspirations to publish, and they've been writing for 4 years, and they're still working on like their second edition clone. That's just never going to see the light of day. And I like some of them, and they're good guys. And they just, you have to have that moment where A, you're committed to it, and B, you're committed to having it finished. So that's what I've got. Let's see what else we've got in the chat. Lots of chatter about the D&D cartoon. Pundit, were you a fan back in the day?
I was a kid when it came out, and so I watched some of it. But I have to be honest that when I watched it, I thought that the premise was kind of corny, right? Even as a kid.
What, because I the amusement park
I'd seen, like, for example, the show was airing before I started actually playing D&D, right? But I'd seen, for example, in the back of comic books, those little comics that they would have, the TSR would have.
Yeah.
It would be like the elf and the warrior and the cleric adventuring, and then some green slime hits them or something like that, and like, so I understood that D&D was supposed to be about like these heroes in a fantasy world, right? I mean, and I was familiar with that already. I'd seen a lot of the, I'd read a lot of fantasy stuff already, or seen fantasy movies, and I knew what the deal with that was, right? And so I thought the premise of, kids from the real world go there, and then they become like these archetypes, these classes, right? And of course, I didn't know at the time also that it was largely to like sell people on the new classes in Unearthed Arcana, none of which except the barbarian in the end, right?
Right.
So I was ironically not the biggest fan of it, right? Like, I thought, for example, that stuff like Thundar or He-Man were way better than the D&D cartoon.
I was a fan. It wasn't the top, obviously. You can see Snake Mountain over my shoulder here. But also directly behind the chair, which you can't see, is the complete lineup of the action figures from the cartoon. Maybe I'll grab them and do a little show and tell here. I liked it. I liked that at that point in my life, I was just discovering the game. So any content was good content. So for me, it was like, it worked on the marketing level, right? The connection was there. I was a kid. These were kids. They're in an amusement park. They like roller coasters. I like roller coasters. They go on this ride and poof, they're in this magical land where this creepy little guy comes out and gives them all this magical artifact, and they become larger than life, fighting the big bad in Venger, not our Venger, and Tiamat. It was a good, I guess, sideline to what became my passion for the game, right? I think had it not been for the cartoon, I may not have invested the time and the effort in learning the game. And they were on par when it started, and then the game took over and the cartoon fell off the cliff for me.
I don't know why, but even as a kid, I never liked shows where like the heroes were kids and did these like super heroic things as kids. I always felt, even like the 8-year-old me felt like that was patronizing in some way, you know?
I looked at it like, hey, they were what, young adults, except for Bobby the Barbarian, which is ironic that he was, I guess, chronologically or at least visually the youngest one in the group. And of course you had Uni, the 80s, you have to have an anthropomorphic animal in your cartoon. That was filling that gap. It was kitschy, but I liked it. What else we got?
Like, I watched around the same time the old Lord of the Rings movie, right? Like, and I thought, oh, that was amazing, right? Like, it was scary, it was exciting. The animation was a little weirder, but it was still like, you know, it was awesome, right? And compared to the D&D cartoon, it just felt disappointing to me. I'm sorry. I know I'm in the minority here.
No, that's okay.
And I'm often in the minority on these sorts of topics. So.
Surly hated Uni. If you look back on it, it filled the void, right? It was definitely part of the formula for the shows at that time. Uni was the Orko of the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. What else do we have? Do it. I'll check them out. Surly wants me to go grab the action figures. So give me 30 seconds. I'll go grab them.
Right, you go right ahead there. I suppose I've commented before that, you know, I don't have collectibles. I don't do action figures or anything like that. I just have RPGs, you know. So I still find it amusing to see grown men having collections of toys, but whatever. I collect pipes. So while we're waiting,
I'm coming. I'm just slow.
Okay, you take your time.
Yeah, let's see what we got here. We've got, and I'll give credit to Hasbro for these ones. They included a die with each action figure, and to collect the entire dice set, you have to buy all of the action figures. But there's Diana, and here's Eric, and you see they were teenagers.
Yeah, I guess
they weren't kids.
No, they weren't kids. You're right, but still,
I disliked Presto more than I dislike Uni. We'll just say that. And then Hank needed a better name for Hank the Ranger. And there's Bobby and Uni. They come as a pair. And I dropped Bobby and Uni. There's Sheila. She's only a 6. And last but not least is Dungeon Master and Venger. So they come as a very expensive pair. So Yeah, Hasbro got some of my money.
Yes, apparently so. That's how they keep in business, you know.
It is. It is.
Nerds and their collectibles.
So much plastic and cardboard, pundit. I am.
Chris Miller just did a super chat for $2. I still have all the original figures. My goodness.
If you ever want to get rid of them at a fair market price, let me know, Chris.
You guys can talk after the show.
All right. Chris Miller says that's a die that will never be rolled because I won't open that box. Not true. I open all of my figures. I'm not one of those collectors. You can see.
Just to clarify, I had tons of action figures as a kid, but it's like I had probably all the Star Wars action figures, right? And I had tons of He-Man, G.I. Joe, DC superheroes, and all that sort of stuff. I never had a single D&D action figure. So that tells you where that was in the scale of what I saw as appealing as a kid.
Hey, and now our action figures are miniatures. I'm not big into the painting scene.
Yeah, I don't collect those either.
I did just get a new 3D printer, though, and I've been playing around. I got a Grell. He came out pretty cool. Grell, I think, is one of the most underrated monsters in the Dungeons & Dragons universe. Anyway, enough show and tell from me.
Well, in my last Sun campaign, one of my players actually designed miniatures for all of the major player characters, as well as one or two of the NPCs, and then gave them to each of the players of those characters.
That's super cool.
That was very cool, but we don't use them. You know,
that's the thing. Like, I don't use them at my table. It's all theater of the mind. Every once in a while, we'll pull out extra dice for positional stuff if it's really necessary, but that's a rarity. Checking out the chat for any last minute things. We're over our hour and a half mark here, so we could start to look at the end of tonight's extravaganza.
Well, does anyone have any last topics to bring up that we can talk about before we call it a night?
And the crowd.
Venger wanted to talk about Twatgate, but I think that was his thing, and it's kind of done. We got a new super chat here.
It is sort of run its course. You know, we're fortunate. Grim Jim texted me before he went public with it, and we got a exclusive interview with him 2 weeks ago on Nerd Cognito, right as it all was breaking. Jim has interesting perspective because of his personal experience with not only the actions, but some of the individuals that were named. And
as did I, yeah, absolutely. But he got it worse than me, I guess. Well, no, I don't know if he got it worse than me. He's just more sensitive than I am, but yeah. I mean,
he would admit that too.
Their biggest campaign of hate was Consultant Gate, and that was against me and Zach.
Right.
But I could take it.
Jeffrem Dakar again. Personally, for proper animated D&D adventures, watch animes like Lotus War, Goblin Slayer, Slayers, Berserk. I'm also going to throw in some of the classic fantasy animation, like Fire and Ice, that like the world, I think, has forgotten about sometimes. You had some good stuff, but I read something somewhere, and I forget which producer it was, but one of the anime producers said, you know, anime is the last bastion for fantasy in visual media. And I can see the argument. I don't know that I would exclusively agree with that, but today it's the one thing where the filter is off. They're not appeasing all of the they-thems. They're doing their thing, and they're still doing it. Now, I'm not a huge anime fan, but I can appreciate that they're at least, you know, not bending the knee as often.
Yeah, I don't watch anime either, but Like I do recognize that it's probably much less corrupted by wokeism than any of the Western cartoons these days. Not that I watch many of those either.
I am seeing that the chat is also winding down. No really barn burners of topics. So I want to take a minute to remind everybody to do stuff, right? If you're not subscribed to Inappropriate Characters right here on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We had 55, 65 strong in the chat tonight, Super Bowl effect. So we were a little light, but that means there should be 55 likes on this stream right now. So give the thumbs up. That really does make a difference. So make sure that you're subscribed, that you've rang the bell so that you get the notification when we go live next time, which I guess we should look at the calendar, Pundit, and see. But and subscribe, it's not just a thing.
10th of March.
It is 1, 2, 3. Nope, one more week. Not the 3rd, the 10th.
The 10th, yeah, that's what I said.
Oh, I heard
10th
3rd.
of March.
Gotta check this ear out. So 10th of March is the next time the three of us, plus who knows, there might be a special guest host. Who knows what's going to go down.
We haven't had one for the last couple of months, so.
I think that it'll be a good time in 4 weeks for everybody. If you want to follow all of us, go to Inappropriate Characters. It's Cars, CHARS, on Twitter. And then all of our links, Vengers, Pundits, and mine are there. There's also links to everything you could possibly want in the show description right here on YouTube. Pundit, final thoughts?
I see Frank Destroso asked me, would you ever consider making a sandbox generator for a classic sword and sorcery setting, Pundit? Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I think that some of the stuff that I have in my medieval authentic stuff and in Sword and Caravan is very useful, especially like Sword and Caravan, just because it's got that 1001 Nights kind of feel it has some ties. I think that was a major inspiration to Sword and Sorcery. So, it's got some of that already, but I could potentially see myself doing that at some point.
And you got a second for if you want to tackle jousting in one of your Pundit files.
Yeah,
people are looking for
the argument to do it then. Yeah. But yeah, I'm for the moment, I quite like doing the historically authentic stuff, and I've got several of those to do. And I have a few other things that I would like to do. I keep fooling around with the possibility of doing a setting for Star Adventurer, for example, but I'm finding it hard to figure out how to make that happen. But it's currently in the brainstorming phase there, and other stuff that I might like to do. But Sword and Sorcery, I do really like Sword and Sorcery. Out of all types of fantasy, it's the one I like most, I think. That isn't, apart from historically authentic fantasy. And I like Gonzo fantasy. Of course, there's a lot of Sword and Sorcery in that, too. It's just Sword and Sorcery is Gonzo with a bit less silliness and a bit less sci-fi stuff. But yeah, I could see myself potentially doing that someday, but we'll see.
Who knows? Who knows? A peek inside the mind of the genius. So there it is. All right, folks. Thank you all for hanging strong in the chat. You guys really make Sunday nights special, and we appreciate you. Again, check the show description for all of our links. March 10th, 8 p.m. right here on the Inappropriate Characters YouTube channel is our next stream. We will see you then. Good night, everybody.
Take care, everyone.